Hello and welcome to another lesson on Hinduism. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're kind of merging a little bit of beliefs and practices here together when looking at the ideas of the four forms of yoga. So in today's lesson, we're going to try and understand what we actually mean by the term yoga within Hinduism. We're going to identify and describe the four main paths to moksha, so looking at four different ways of performing yoga. We're going to try and use quotations from sources of wisdom or authority to try and then help us practice some GCSE style questions using some of these core Hindu beliefs. Now, to start off with then, we need to know exactly what we mean by the term yoga. Now, yoga literally just means union with Brahman. Now, many people, if you watch the last lesson, will know that that's the similar sort of idea of what we mean by moksha. Now, yoga is that thing that allows you to be momentarily connected with Brahman, and if you continuously practice yoga, can be permanently connected with Brahman in moksha. So it is a spiritual discipline, and it's done, as I said, to try and achieve that escape from samsara. Now, the yoga that is best for you will be dependent on your personality, the lifestyle that you live, the stage of life that you are at. It also might determine the type of god that you worship or the chosen deity, because particular deities have more sort of links to particular types of yoga. Now, one of the key terms then we need to try and make sure we remember from last lesson is that idea of moksha. If you haven't watched that lesson yet on the sort of the nature of human life, feel free to copy down this definition here or go back and watch that video if you haven't done so already. And so now we need to get into looking at some of the core ideas of yoga. Now, the first one is karma yoga. This means selfless action without attachment to outcomes. So whenever you do something that is kind for someone else just because it is kind, not because you care about that individual or you're attached to them or you want something back from them, that is going to allow you to sort of accumulate positive karma. So karma yoga is the way to try and accumulate positive karma. It's living in accordance with your dharma, your duty, which again, we looked at last lesson. If you haven't got that key word written down anywhere before, write it down now. Dharma literally just means the duty that you have to fulfill. Okay? Now, is often followed by people who live within a household. So it might be that you've decided that you're going to cook and dinner for your parents, or you have gone out and you have seen someone fall over and you've helped them up and you've shown them kindness and love. Not because, you're expecting that back, but because it's the right thing to do in that moment. Now, some of the key terms that you might need here then is the very basic definition of karma yoga. It's that path of right action. So all the actions that you do are correct. They are going to allow you to receive good, positive karma. As well as then you've got this concept of the dharma, of your moral and social duty. Now, one of the key quotes that I wanted to look at with you is this one here from the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever you do, do that as an offering to me. Now, this is very similar to something that has been said in other religious sort of texts in the past, and other concepts in other religions. But this idea that whenever you do something good for someone else, you're actually doing it almost for Brahman. It's like you are showing as an offering that you are a good individual. So that when you do an action, you are sort of doing that as an offering to the gods almost. So this is how karma yoga can definitely help you achieve moksha. You then get onto this idea of bhakti yoga, which is very much more lively in terms of its interaction. Now, this is a sort of a devotion to a personal deity, and this is going to be sort of performed differently depending on what that deity is. However, this is usually a form of worship through what they call puja, which is effectively either singing, prayer, usually involving some dancing involved in there as well. Now, this is very popular in Vaishnavism and Shaivism, the sort of followers of Vishnu and Shiva. Bhakti yoga is something that is often includes sort of chanting things over and over and over again. A very famous group of Hindus who will perform Bhakti yoga would be the Hare Krishnas, for example. Now, bhakti literally just means loving and devotion to God. So when you are performing that as part of yoga, you are showing that love and devotion to God as a way to try and reunite with Brahman. You also then have this idea of the darshan. Now, the darshan is the sacred site of the deity. This concept that when you are worshipping, especially when you are using things like murtis around you, those statues or the images of God, you can almost see the deity for yourself, but also when you are showing such absolute devotion, the deities can also see you. So they can see you when you are worshipping, when you are performing bhakti yoga, and they are pleased with those actions when you do perform them. So this can be another really important way to try and reach moksha. Now, a key quote then is this one here. Fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, from the Bhagavad Gita. Again, showing the importance of being devoted to God, being devoted to a particular deity. And if you can fix your mind on that being, then you will receive that sort of positive rebirth or eventually moksha. You then get onto Jnana Yoga. Now, this is arguably one of the harder ones to do on the basis that only up until recently has there been the availability to actually able to study some of the scriptures that are available within Hinduism. For many, many years, many Hindus were not able to perform Jnana Yoga properly because they did not have access. It was only the Brahmin caste who had the availability to actually read those scriptures and understand what it was that was being said. So Jnana Yoga is actually something that's fairly recent for many modern Hindus. It will also include the study of meditation and how it works, as well as having a moment of philosophical reflection, focusing on what is the right and wrong thing to be doing, what are the reasons that we are here, what is our purpose in life. Now, this is the kind of the realization of the unity of the Atman and Brahman. If you study Jnana Yoga well enough, you will be able to make that connection between the Atman in your soul and Brahman, that sort of superior spiritual being that creates existence. Now, this is something that is usually for more spiritual seekers and sages, those who are the sort of philosophers, the poets, the ones who are going to interact with the scriptures on a slightly deeper level, those who are seeking some sort of spiritual release from this world, maybe. Now, for many Hindus, that might not necessarily be their main focus in life. So again, this doesn't apply necessarily to everyone. But for those who are definitely trying to reach moksha, this is one of the ways that is going to help you do so significantly quicker. Because if you can understand the ways that people have done it in the past, through reading the scriptures, through reading different texts by people of importance, you're going to be able to pick up those tips and tricks on how to reach moksha quicker. So Jnana literally just means spiritual knowledge. When it's then with yoga, it is again that idea of spiritual knowledge in terms of trying to reconnect with Brahman. You also then have the concept of the Atman, your inner soul and your inner self. Now again, we spoke about this last lesson, but if you didn't watch it yet, do feel free to copy down the definition from here. Finally, then we get to this quotation here from the Upanishad, and it says, "He who sees all beings in his self." It's this idea that we are not one individual, but part of something significantly bigger. We are part of Brahman, and therefore there's part of ourself in all things, in the same way that Brahman is within all things. Because technically speaking, we are Brahman. The fact that we exist within reality shows that we are Brahman. The fact that we have a soul, this Atman, it is part of Brahman. So we can see all beings within his sort of self, this idea of being within Brahman as well. Finally, then, we get onto Raja Yoga. Now, this is more of a focus on mental control, discipline, and meditation. So this is where you'll see more people performing sort of traditional meditation, however, can also be slightly different from that as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, this is based on the Yoga Sutras, particular texts which told people how to go about performing various different forms of yoga, and this is where this concept of Raja Yoga came from. Now, for many people, this might be just sitting still and sort of closing off your mind and releasing all of your thoughts to allow yourself to try and pick together some understanding of the world around you. However, in other cases, this can just be a mental control over particular bodily senses, things like pain, for example. There have been cases of sort of Hindu ascetics going along, and sort of there's one particular individual who had raised his arm up in the air for something like 30 or 40 years or so, and he had never dropped his arm. He had tied his arm up so it would stay up. And it's this idea that it's mind over matter. If you can have total control over your mind, you no longer experience pain. Now, particular groups do all sorts of different things to their bodies to try and demonstrate this. However, this can also be, as I said earlier, a sort of more sitting still, trying to close off your mind and sort of having that calming meditation. Now, it mostly includes that idea of breathing, concentration, and stillness. If you can control all sort of parts of your body and have it working in unison, you start to be able to push yourself further in terms of the abilities in understanding the world around you. So Raja Yoga then is the royal path of meditation. It is something that is important, it's crucial for you to do. So many people will perform Raja Yoga as well as then other forms. This is something that is especially sort of experienced in the sort of later stages of human life. In Hinduism, they believe that you have sort of four main stages in your life. You have the child stage, where you're sort of like a baby. You have the student stage, the family stage, and then the ascetic stage, where you can sort of leave everything behind and go and study the religion more and actually practice it more. Raja Yoga is something that is more likely to be sort of followed by the ascetics, those later stages of life, who are trying to sort of seek that sort of more clear path as to know where they're going to go next. You also then have this concept of samadhi, which is the state of deep spiritual absorption. So when they are that deep in their meditations, they reach a state of samadhi where they are so sort of spiritually connected that they sort of able to block things out, things like pain, for example. Now, here we see from the Yoga Sutras this idea that yoga is the cessation of the movements of the mind. So it's the way that the mind can eventually control itself, but you need to do physical things to allow your mind to do that in the first place. And if you can clear your mind and you can start understanding the world around you, again, that's another way that you can reach moksha. So for a quick comparison then, here's a quick table just to show you what each of the basic forms of yoga are with basic definitions. If this is going to be useful for you, I'd recommend copying this down. It could be useful to make flashcards or something with if you wish to. I'll give you a minute to pause the video. We'll be moving on in 3, 2, and 1. So, as I said to you, particular forms of yoga are going to link to particular denominations, particular groups of Hindus. Now, for the Vaishnavisms, they're going to have real focus on Bhakti Yoga, especially towards Vishnu and Krishna. So, as I said earlier, one of the groups that will perform Bhakti Yoga on a large scale are the Hare Krishnas, the worshippers of Krishna. Whereas Shaivism includes more sort of Jnana and Bhakti Yoga towards Shiva. So trying to understand spiritual understanding of Hinduism as a whole, and also performing then Bhakti Yoga specifically towards Shiva. Now that could be performed in lots of different ways, usually with chanting and other offerings as well to please Shiva, the god of destruction. We also then have this concept of smartism. Now, this is a more modern concept which is coming through India and through Hinduism at the moment, which actually suggests that you should accept all 4 yogas as valid. They all have equal importance in terms of achieving moksha, as they all do something slightly different. So a key quote then, what is one, sages give many names. This idea that although there is one being, one god, many sort of wise people within Hinduism give that one god many names, hence the existence of all the other gods. Now, because all these different gods have different characteristics, what will please them will be very different, which is why you're going to have different actions, different forms of yoga that are going to link to particular gods and maybe not so much others. So let's get to a quick checkpoint then. Here are 4 statements. What I would like you to do is tell me what type of yoga are the following statements describing. I'll give you a second to have a look at them. If you want to write out your answers, you can do. Otherwise, you can just speak them out loud so that you know the answers. We're going to go through those answers then in 3, 2, and 1. So for number 1, focus on scriptures and religious texts. That is Jnana Yoga. Focuses on meditation and stillness. That is Raja Yoga. Focus on selfless action to achieve moksha. That is Karma Yoga. And focus on showing devotion through song and dance. That is Bhakti Yoga. Now this leads us on then to a 12-mark question, and I want to go into this question in a little bit more detail than we maybe do in other videos, just to sort of help you see exactly how I would structure a full answer if we had the availability to. Now, here are some basic exam tips just for you guys to have a quick read through. You want to make sure that you have at least 2 points for and against. That way you can have that sort of reasoned consideration of different points of view. It's not just one or the other, it has to be reasoned, plural. You need to have multiple reasons for that particular point of view. In doing so, that is what's going to help you unlock sort of those 12-mark answers, because you need to be able to follow a logical chain of reasoning. If you can use scriptural quotations, so quotations from the religious texts we've looked at today, the laws of Manu, Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, whatever it might be, if you can include scriptural quotations in there, that will score you very, very well. Now, just as a note on that, these do not have to be perfect sort of copies of what exactly it says in those texts. If you have paraphrased, this is something that is going to still be marked as correct, because exam markers are going to look at it, they're going to be able to search up the quotation, see that you're on the right lines, and they will still be able to give you that mark. The crucial part, and where many people go wrong in terms of sort of being capped at 9 marks out of 12, is they forget to put a conclusion on at the end. If you do not have that justified conclusion, you do not have access to that top band of marking. So just by having a couple of sentences saying, overall, I believe this is the strongest argument because, just those couple of sentences could give you access then to those full marks. Now, I would personally recommend using some sort of peel structure. Now, this might look different depending on where you are from, what your schools have taught you, but they're going to effectively do the same thing. This is the structure I would recommend you follow. You should sort of, as the question said, that Bhakti Yoga is something that is going to help you reach moksha. That's the sort of idea we're going to give arguments for and against. The first paragraph, I would always agree with the statement. The reason that I would do this is because if you do not mention what is said within the statement in your answer at all, you're not going to score very well. The maximum amount of marks you can get is possibly 3 marks. So if you want to be able to make sure that you get those full 12, it is always worth talking about what it says in the statement first. So you're going to agree with the statement in your first paragraph. Now, in that, you're going to include a point, evidence of some sort of quotation, usually referencing where it's come from. You're going to explain that in further detail, and then you're going to link that back to how does this work with moksha. Now, that's going to be your first paragraph. Your second paragraph is going to be another agree statement. So this is going to be a second idea that is supported in major denominations like Vaishnavism. So because Vaishnavists use Bhakti Yoga, you can use that as your second argument. So now we have 2 arguments for the statement. Now, at the end of that paragraph, because you might want to combine those 2 into one sort of super paragraph, if you wish. At the end of that, you're going to suggest why this is either a strong or weak argument. You're then going to propose an alternative side. Without this, you are not going to get more than 6 marks. It could be that other yogas suit other personalities, could be an argument you make. Again, following that same point, evidence, explain, link, structure. You then do the same again for paragraph 4. The idea of jnana yoga or karma yoga might be deeper and might allow you to dig deeper into the religion than bhakti yoga, which is just sort of singing and dancing. Again, at the end of that sort of either super paragraph or at the end of those 2 paragraphs, you want to have one sentence saying what it is that you believe is whether this is a strong argument or a weak argument. And then you're going to want to come to your conclusion, which needs to be that reasoned judgment. Any path can lead to moksha. You could suggest that actually just by specifically choosing Bhakti Yoga, that's not enough. You need to have all paths to reach it. Now, it needs to have reasons in there. And if you can throw in some evaluative words, this is the strongest argument, this is the weakest argument, things like that within your conclusion, there is no doubt in my mind that you should be able to score 12 marks. Now, if you can do this within 15 minutes, you are well on your way again to getting those full marks. So my recommendation to you is have a go at answering this question yourself, have a go at using this structure, see if you can do it in around 15 minutes using a timer, and see if you can get those full marks. Have a look online and see if you can find a mark scheme for your specific exam board and see if you can find a question that is similar. If you can see what sort of things they gave marks for, or what sort of things they had issues with in previous years. By doing this, you're going to know exactly what the examiners are going to be looking for when it comes to you taking your exam. Here are a list of then possible points that you might want to include in your 12-mark answer if you were interested in having a go at writing it out yourself. So in terms of the agree side of things, you could talk about bhakti, having that focus on the love and devotion for your particular deity. Now, we have a quotation there from Bhagavad Gita. We spoke about the fact that it is widely practiced in Vaishnavism and Shaivism, and there's no need for high levels of intellect, meaning that any person, any layman could go away and perform Bhakti Yoga. This does not require any particular level of knowledge or understanding of the religion. There's some points for disagree. You might see here that this is a little bit more developed than the agree side. That's because I personally would argue that the disagree side is the stronger view, because it just having Bhakti Yoga is very close-minded and doesn't necessarily allow you to understand the religion, which is crucial in your ability to be able to reach moksha. That's why I would say that the stronger argument would be the disagree paragraph. Now, it's okay that this is not a balanced argument, with the fact that there is more evidence being put on one side rather than the other. What you might wish to do is to choose the first 2 points from the agree side and choose the 3 points all from the disagree side. Not every single point needs to have evidence, but it's certainly useful to have several bits of evidence throughout your answer, just to make sure that you are ticking all the boxes. So to sum up then what it is that we have looked at today, we have looked at the idea that all yogas aim for the same goal of reaching moksha, all in their own separate ways. We've looked at the 4 main types. We've looked at Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. We have looked at how different people might need different paths, whether that be their particular life stages or the deities that they believe in, as well as this concept then that because of their core beliefs, they're going to respect everybody's individual spiritual journeys and respect the fact that everybody's going to have their own way of achieving moksha if that is what their aim is. I hope this has been useful for you. Keep your eyes out for future Hinduism lessons coming out soon. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next one.